Ayubuan, Sri Lanka. Welcome to my channel, guys. Adam Barwal, and if it's your first time, you know what to do. Please consider subscribing below. I'll do my best to keep you informed, entertained, inspired, and intrigued with all my YouTube videos. And as you can see in the title of this particular video, we'll be doing something a little bit different, a little bit of an educational video perhaps, because we are going to be watching a little bit of a glimpse of the history of Sri Lanka, particularly on the army or the war. Yeah, this was heavily requested to me via my Facebook, links in the description box. The title of the video is Sri Lankan Army Truth, as you can see in the title, and I'll be linking this on the description as well so that you can watch it for yourself just in case you haven't yet. And by the way, we just reached over 18,000 subscribers. Thank you so much. This video, by the way, is quite long. I don't know if I'm gonna be dividing this into two parts, but let's just see how it goes. Okay, let's start. Okay, and there it is, Sri Lankan Army Truth.
On May 19, 2009, a moment the whole country had been waiting for arrived. The war had ceased, and peace had begun to envelop the country. But the run-up to this moment had been a long and laborious one. Over 3 decades, to be precise. And how did the combined forces of Sri Lanka succeed in vanquishing the once invincible LTTE, safeguarding the sovereignty and territorial integrity and the protection of its citizens?
What or who is the LTTE or LTT, guys? Please let me know below in the comments.
Those very concepts of sovereignty and territorial integrity were constantly threatened and undermined by the LTTE,
LTT,
a terrorist, non-state actor. In this regard, bombs targeting civilians, conscriptions, and recruitment of child soldiers, capture of the territory of the Sri Lankan state by force, were carried out. The duty then, by default,
I do recall some of you mentioned to me like there was like a civil war,
government had to initiate,
like I don't know, 2 or maybe 3 decades ago,
as a means to a peaceful end.
Okay, now at least we're gonna be
Through the
having
80s, 90s, and early 2000s, the armed forces fought back with discipline, countering the atrocities of the LTTE and violation of human rights. But countless lives were lost, and the war dragged on. However, attempts by successive governments to solve this issue through negotiations failed. The LTTE challenged and attempted to undermine the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Sri Lankan state. In the midst of this quagmire, hope raised its voice when on the 19th of November 2005, President Mahinda Rajapaksa came to power with a majority vote base. He took on the reins, keen on reconciliation and rebuilding, ethnic unity and religious harmony. His call for peace was ignored, and the LTTE continued their rampage on civilian targets, including the Muslim population, with a renewed fervor.
Okay, now we're going to have the answer.
94 child soldiers during the conflict and activated countless female suicide bombers. Captured footage revealed a semi-conventional organized army with well-planned, sophisticated training centers imparting superior skills in endurance and weapon training. It was with such a radical organization that the Sri Lankan army was waging a long-drawn
Are they
battle.
Tamils?
On 15th June 2006, the LTTE attacked a bus, killing at least 64 civilians
Oh no.
at Kapitikolama. Action had to be taken to avoid a man-made catastrophe.
Because as far as I know, there are 2 like ethnic or groups there, right? Sinhalese and Tamil.
Tactics, superior weaponry, and common sense.
Please let me know, guys.
The task was chiefly in the hands of the Sri Lankan army, assisted by the Air Force, Navy, Civil Defense Force, and the police. Mention must be made of Gotabaya Rajapaksa, a retired lieutenant colonel who as defense secretary subscribed to the appointment of high-performance youngsters with previous battlefield experience as commanders, encouraged weapons systems procurement, recruitment, and training. Most importantly, preparations were made for a prolonged engagement with consistent maintenance of momentum. 5 more divisions were created. Recruitment shot up.
It is a fact that wars can like definitely, significantly shape the state of a country or a nation.
90 new battalions were created. The military leadership adopted an infantry training doctrine that emphasized
That's why history is
section-level
just
small unit infantry operations
extremely
and the special
important,
operations
and
team SIOT model of 8 to 6 men was enforced. Multiple thrust fronts were maintained and increased from 3 to 8 at times. Commando and Special Forces units were extensively used behind LTT lines, and these operations led to the interception and elimination of numerous LTTE field commanders, groups, and fortifications.
I have a feeling that one of the T in LTTE stands for Tamil, but I could be wrong.
91 officers and 5,082 other ranks in action. In addition, 905 officers and 27,230 other ranks were seriously wounded. Over 1,500 sergeants and corporals were commissioned as officers to meet shortages and operational exigencies. Despite the obstacles, the military adopted stringent security measures to contain and intercept LTTE cells, aided by increasingly successful intelligence gathering operations, while the LTTE adopted a defensive military strategy in order to maintain the captured territory. The main objective of the forces shifted to inflicting high attrition rates on the LTTE, rather than recapture of territory and maintaining the initiative by launching continuous offensive operations along multiple thrust lines to divide and destroy LTTE forces.
LTT internal dispute, a bolster for the army. Okay.
On the 24th of March 2004, a breakaway Tamil rebel group led by the LTTE Eastern Tamil commander V. Muralidharan or Colonel Karna broke away.
So it seems as if LTT itself is having like an internal battle, or amongst them.
Key intelligence flowed into the hands of the armed forces.
They are divided.
With the closure of the Mavilaru sluice gate by the LTTE, thousands of civilian farmers were deprived of their right to water. A humanitarian operation was initiated by the government to liberate the Mavilaru sluice gate to facilitate water to civilians.
Yeah, the civilians are usually the ones who suffer the most, I'd say.
Areas such as
collateral damage, or
and Tupigala, the strongholds of LTTE terrorists were recaptured, and the LTTE were unable to conduct anything more than low-intensity operations in the east.
The strategy of the Sri Lankan Navy.
From the Sri Lankan Navy's perspective, its role was to achieve sea control and enforce sea denial. The ceasefire had been misused by the LTTE to acquire military equipment, arms and ammunition. The Sri Lankan Navy countered this threat with a small boat concept. These naval boats had superior speed, high maneuverability,
very wise,
and firepower, similar to the weapon outfit of the Dora fast attack craft. These boat squadrons effectively countered the LTTE's suicide craft threat. Over 150 such boats were indigenously built.
Well, talk about strategy.
Sri Lankan Navy had to eliminate floating warehouses of the LTTE to dominate the blue waters and to assist ground battle. These floating warehouses were located and destroyed.
Oh no. Strategy of the Sri Lankan Air Force.
With the escalation of the war, the Sri Lankan Air Force transformed itself into a truly modern and high-tech fighting force, successfully confronting
So it's like all the
world's
forces
first ever
and
terrorist
like the
air wing.
fighting departments of
Its
Sri Lanka
strategy
are
shifted from being a reactive one to a
trying
proactive
to,
approach
you know,
to its
combat the
preparedness.
LTTE.
Its strength was increased from 1,000 men in 1951 to 27,000 men and 1,300 officers.
Wow.
With the addition of fighter jet aircraft squadrons, helicopter squadrons, and transport aircraft squadrons, both fixed-wing and rotor-wing helicopters. The latest technology, such as unmanned aerial vehicle systems, was introduced so that the real-time
that was
information on
2008.
operations could be seen. Live pictures of targets were taken, and the attack aircraft were fitted with reliable self-protecting systems, allowing the pilots the liberty of attacking their targets at a careful pace. As the war between the legitimate Sri Lanka armed forces and the LTTE terrorists escalated, the latter resorted to inhumane violence, targeting civilians and their property. Explosions in trains, buses, and public places became
So
rampant.
all of this happened in
The
a
battle
span
reached a
of
point where the
3
LTTE
decades,
began to
was it?
spew its arsenal in a show of desperation. The LTTE deployed the Air Tigers, and in brazen acts of defiance, its planes targeted the civilian and economic targets, such as Kalanithisa Power Station, Kolonava Oil Refinery,
Oh no.
Katanaga Airport, and the Inland Revenue Building. Suicide bombers went on a rampage, even in the guise of pregnant women, in a deadly
no, that's
low-intensity
not good
campaign
at
throughout
all.
Sri Lanka, targeting internationally protected persons such as diplomats, key politicians, government officials, civilians, and military commanders.
Okay, here
Slowly
we
but
go.
surely, the LTTE's weapon depots, training camps, top secret bunkers began to be captured and revealed to the media. But the struggle was not just between two armies, but rather people caught in the mire of a war
Yep,
reaching its
absolutely.
desperate moments. The
You're
economy
like,
was
caught in the
shambles.
middle.
Even essential items were a rarity.
And can you
The
imagine the
landscape of their
anxiety?
surrounding was desolate, and generation after generation was being born into a life of gunfire and strife. While the advance of the Sri Lankan army was steady and relentless, the LTTE resorted to ingenious defenses. They cleared vast jungle stretches to create fields of fire, constructing 3-meter-high ditch-compound fortifications where the whole frontage was laced with booby traps, anti-personnel, and anti-tank mines. The largest of the LTTE's ditch-compound constructions were a 22-kilometer stretch from Nachikura to Akkarayankulam, and a 12-kilometer-long ditch compound ring defending Kilinochchi. In January 2008, the Wani operation entered a decisive stage. The LTTE was forced to simultaneously defend 4 strategically vital approaches, with each division having a broader strategic objective. The
What part of
57th
Sri
Division's
Lanka,
main
guys,
goal was the
did
capture
this
of
like
Kilinochchi,
happen?
the de facto LTTE capital.
Oh,
The
there.
58th Division focused on sealing the northwest coastline
Northwest,
and opening
okay.
a direct road link to the Jaffna Peninsula. Attempts, meanwhile, were made by the LTTE to enter the Muladip jungles. Anticipating such a move, 1 infantry division and 4 special forces squadrons were deployed behind task forces 2, 3, and 4 as strategic reserves to counter LTTE penetrations. And the 59th Division set its objectives on sealing the northeastern coastline from Valioer and to capture Pudukkudiyiruppu. the LTTE command and logistical headquarters. Finally, the 53rd and 55th Divisions, which had previously garrisoned the Jaffna Peninsula, forced the LTTE to commit forces to prevent a breakthrough on its northern frontage. In a desperate bid, the LTTE now pressed into service tens of thousands of civilians, children, and adults, as it witnessed increasing numbers of LTTE fleet commanders and veteran guerrillas killed in action.
They're like engulfing that area, the world's largest.
The final confrontation became the opportunity for one of the world's largest hostage crisis and humanitarian effort. As the LTT's hold began to shrink,
Look
they
at that,
resorted to detain over 290,000 civilians as human shields. Throughout the confrontation, the army was clear in its strategy to minimize the loss of human life, secure the release of the hostages, and capture the LTTE's top-ranked leadership. The armed forces responded to the desperate civilians, providing escapees with their own food rations.
There were refugees as
assisting
well, or
others in labor,
escapees.
providing first aid to injured civilians, and securing those who were abandoned in the fight for freedom. The IDPs, as they came to be known,
It's like
were
so
the worst
unfortunate.
victims of the war. Used as human shields by the LTTE, they were a major concern to the forces. Considering the high civilian population mingling with the LTTE, the army limited its firepower and avoided the use of heavy weaponry to prevent civilian casualties. On the instructions of President Mahinda Rajapaksa, the military initiated action to accelerate the release of the IDPs caught up in the confrontation, minimizing human loss. Medicines, food, and essential items made their way to the civilians, who opted for help from the government forces. The climax of the siege came when the LTT leadership made a furtive bid to escape, and as their escort guards engaged the army, a firefight ensued that brought the 3-decade-old war to a close.
3 decades. 30 years. Oh my God.
On the morning of May 19, 2009, the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, President Rajapaksa, in a brief address to the nation announced the end of the war. A gripping saga in the history of the nation had finally come to an end, and the teardrop in the Indian Ocean could now shed tears of joy. The nation erupted with joyous celebration.
And this was not very long ago, guys, right? It was.
But the fact
It ended around
peace
mid
had
2000s.
finally dawned. On the 19th of May 2009, as the guns fell silent, the responsibility of the government tripled. The Sri Lanka Army, together with the Air Force, Navy, Civil Defense Force, and police, had effectively tackled the supposedly invincible LTTE, becoming the world's most coveted fighting force.
World's most coveted concern for IDPs.
In the midst of the euphoria, the IDPs were not forgotten. Aid was flown in from the south, and medical help and essential items were provided solely by the government. Addressing
Is he still your
IDPs,
president right now, guys? Or?
rehabilitating the captured and the surrendered LTT cadres, providing shelter, education, and livelihood for the IDPs were the impending challenges. The government, however, faced them with courage. 295,000
IDPs are, I think, the people directly affected by what
as the
happened,
war escalated.
you know, with the
And
war.
they were temporarily harbored in 15 IDP centers island-wide. And as at today, 228,264 persons have returned to their former places of dwelling. 5,903 have been rehabilitated by 31st May 2011. And many of them have been exposed to vocational training in English language. And they've been incorporated into civil society. As mine clearing is still underway with the support of the UN, houses have been constructed and schools have recommenced their academic programs. Since the conclusion of the war, not even a single violent incident had been reported from across the country. Ever since then, the entire country has been free of violence, and a peaceful environment has prevailed. Now every single person can look forward to and live in lasting peace and harmony.
Such very very interesting and a lot of information. Just a small glimpse of what happened in Sri Lanka during the 3-decade war, and I believe for maybe every country of the world has this type of political unrest, war, battles, and even up until now, some countries are still experiencing that. It is, it will literally just shape, as I've mentioned earlier, the political and even the social climate of a country or a nation. These battles are sometimes necessary, or you know what, though at the end of the day, if the civilians are, you really have to like measure the pros and the cons. All throughout this video though, I was like thinking to myself, what does LTTE means, because it seems as if it was not mentioned what the actual group was. I'm assuming that it's the Tamil forces. I could be wrong. Please let me know below in the comments as well. I know I could just Google everything, but it's easier, it's much more believable coming from you guys, especially to my Sri Lankan subscribers. Yeah, and thank you so much for watching until the end. I know this was a very long video. I'll see you in my next upload. Bye!